I'm going to call this Critical Thinking 101. Brief, multi part series. Go over a few ideas, get some wheels turning, brainstorming, and a few mental experiments, thought experiments. We're going to go back to school on this one. It says, and this is from the Foundation for Critical Thinking. It says critical thinking is a rich concept that has been developing throughout the past 2,500 years. The term critical thinking has its roots in the mid-late 20th century. Below, we offer overlapping definitions which together form a substantive and transdisciplinary conception of critical thinking. Says critical thinking as defined by National Council for Excellence in Critical Thinking. A lot of this you can read for yourself. I want to point out a few things. Critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and or evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to belief and action. In its exemplary form, it is based on universal intellectual values that transcend subject matter divisions, such as clarity, accuracy, perception, that's precision, consistency, relevance, sound evidence, good reasons, depth, breadth, and fairness. It says it entails the examination of those structures or elements of thought implicit in all reasoning, purpose, problem, or question at issue, assumptions, concepts, empirical grounding, reasoning leading to conclusions, implications, and consequences, objections from alternative viewpoints, and frame of reference. Critical thinking is being responsive to variable subject matter, issues, and purposes, is incorporated in a family of interwoven modes of thinking, among them scientific thinking, mathematical thinking, historical thinking, anthropological thinking, economic thinking, moral thinking, and philosophical thinking. And philosophical thinking. And I also want to add abstract thinking right there. It says, and this is something important that I want to point out. It's actually the whole reason I'm reading any of this. It says critical thinking can be seen as having two components. One, a set of information and belief generating and processing skills, and two, the habit based on intellectual commitment of using those skills to guide behavior. It is thus to be contrasted with one, the mere acquisition and retention of information alone, because it involves a particular way in which information is sought and treated. And two, the mere possession of a set of skills because it involves the continual use of them. And three, the mere use of those skills as an exercise without acceptance of their results. That's important. I need to go back over that. The two parts of critical thinking is a set of information and belief generating and processing skills and the habit based on intellectual commitment of using those skills to guide behavior. It is thus to be contrasted with the mere acquisition and retention of information alone. Stop. So that makes all the difference right there. Basically, what it's saying is a good critical thinker not only finds information, but also uses that information for the better. And so that's a key. Critical thinking varies according to the motivation underlying it. When grounded in selfish motives, it is often manifested in the skillful manipulation of ideas in service of one's own or one's group's vested interest. As such, it is typically intellectually flawed. However pragmatically successful it might be, when grounded in fair mindedness and intellectual integrity, it is typically of a higher order intellectually, though subject to the charge of idealism by those habituated to its selfish use. Critical thinking of any kind is never universal in any individual. Everyone is subject to it episodes of undisciplined or irrational thought. Its quality is therefore typically a matter of degree and dependent on, among other things, the quality and depth of experience in giving domain of thinking or with respect to particular class of questions. No one is a critical thinker through and through, but only to such and such a degree, and with such and such insights and blind spots, subject to such and such tendencies towards self delusion. For this reason, the development of critical thinking skills and dispositions is a lifelong endeavor. I probably should just summed all of that up. So basically, what it's saying is, and what I want to point out is, there's definitely a need to be a critical thinker. No one, we're not just naturally programmed that way. So we got to break out of the programming that we in. And for most people, it's a lifelong endeavor, you know. So we strive to achieve this in order to be better people, to better our surroundings and environment, have better relationships, a better life in general. And that's why it's important. It's also important to be self taught. Think for yourself, find out stuff for yourself. It's definitely important to go to school, go to college, universities, graduate, get degrees. I've been to college, I don't have a degree yet, dot, dot, dot. Teach yourself what you want to know, then learning anything else would be that much easier. Teach yourself what you want to know, what you need to know. That's important because that puts you on the right track to being a good critical thinker, to being able to see through the manipulation, you know, the problems, day to day problems that people have, you know. Being a good critical thinker will eliminate a lot of those problems. So, being self taught, picking up a dictionary, you know, an encyclopedia. Because once you start being a good critical thinker, you'll learn to question everything. And there's nothing wrong with questions. You know, that's a main point. Keep it simple. And they say you can never ask too many questions. Well, that's not true because the quality of questions that you ask will determine the amount of questions that you need to ask in the first place. So asking the right questions and get you the right answers. You ain't got to keep asking a bunch of different questions. So that's important. When you question things, look for specific answer, look for the answer to your question, go from there. So don't be scared to question everything. Go back, re-question some of the things you think you already have answers to. That's what being a critical thinker is. It's not it's not getting information, it's what you do with it that makes the difference. So with that being said, I'm gonna just jump right into it. So let's just jump right into it. We go to these colleges and universities and schools of higher learning, and we learn and they teach, but we still don't become critical thinkers, which is essential to our survival. Maybe now more than ever. If we got any reason to question anything, we got every reason to question everything. So that's where we at today. And so we learn things in school, such as, or in post secondary school, such as, like, for instance, the Hegelian dialectic. It says right here, an interpretive method. And I know everybody already know this. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. You can read it on your own. Again, I'm going over a few things, pointing out a few things. Ultimately, just getting the wheels turning. The Hegelian dialectic, it says, an interpretive method originally used to relate specific entities or events to the absolute idea in which some assertable proposition, thesis, is necessarily opposed by an equally assertable and apparently contradictory proposition or antithesis, the mutual contradiction being reconciled on a higher level of truth by a third proposition, synthesis. I'm going to go over it. I'm going to come back to that. Keep that in mind. Dialectic itself is Greek in origin, Greek, German. Says, also known as the dialectical method, is a discourse between two or more people holding different points of view about a subject but wishing to establish the truth through reasoned argumentation. Dialectic resembles debate, but the concept excludes subjective elements such as elemental appeal and rhetoric in the modern projective sense. Dialectic may thus be contrasted with both the eristic, which refers to argument that aims to successfully dispute another's argument rather than searching for truth, and the didactic method, wherein one side of the conversation teaches the other side. Dialectic is alternatively known as minor logic as opposed to major logic or critique. So we learn these things in school and we get the answers right on the test, but we still don't know what they're saying. We still don't know what it means. So basically, the Hegelian dialect is where they say a person has an idea. Let's just throw the opposite of whatever it is at him. And whatever he ends up coming up with, that's what he's really is. That's what he really got. That's what we're really working with. That's the Hegelian dialect. And I guess it makes sense, but again, think it all the way through. It's like I just told you what the word dialectic means. It's really just a form of opposing or diffusing your argument. And so these are bases, this is what a lot of our mechanisms and social structure situations are based on, this Hegelian dialectic. And so they teach us stuff like Pavlov and his salivating dogs. And again, we learn it all and we get the answers right on the test. We still don't understand what it means. We see examples of this in our everyday life. For instance, the break bell, the lunch bell at work, or you know, somebody's phone ring in a social situation, everybody checking their phone, you know, or even, for instance, a baby crying, will alert everybody's attention and get you to react a certain way. So that's the same as Pavlov, and so we're the salivating dogs in a way, in a manner of speaking. And again, that's okay, but you got to understand that. You got to think it all the way through. So this is what our social structure is based on. And this is why they want us to learn this. You know, you you get the answers right, you move forward in life. But my goal is to make you a better thinker. Let's do a little thought experiment. For instance, like sports teams. Not really at random, but something that everybody can relate to. And I want to know what y'all think about this. Put your answers in the comments. Did you notice that, especially football teams in particular? Now, we could research this ourselves, look into it ourselves. But did you notice that all the team mascots either are, once were, or thought to be myths? All of the mascots were one point thought of as a myth, or is a myth, or it was at one point and now we know it's the truth. All of these things. Did you already notice that? I mean, does it make a difference? Will you look at it differently after you realize it? Does it matter in our day-to-day lives any at all? I mean, so that's just something to think about, you know, to help open your eyes to something that you might not see. It's okay to be a critical thinker and come to better conclusions, even with some of these mundane or minor things that don't have a great influence on our life. Even things like movies, you're gonna have to check back to my Truth in Movies series. A lot of good things, a lot of things to point out, but in fact, there is truth in movies. So, being a critical thinker when viewing these things brings a whole different perspective. It makes you look at it altogether differently when you actually thinking about it critically. It's a lot of truth in movies, and a lot of people already know this. And there's a lot of good people doing a lot of good work in that field. So I'm not gonna do any in depth with that. You have to check that out for yourself. But a lot of this stuff can be pointed out to help us become better critical thinkers. So it's okay to think about these things critically, even though they may seem unimportant or ambiguous, as long as it brings about a better conclusion. For instance, books, textbooks, fiction, nonfiction, everything you read should actually be read in a manner of critical thinking. They say the devil is in the details, and that's true. That's how the details get inside you. That's how the devil gets inside you, within the details, if you're not thinking critically. I would definitely do a breakdown on books, certain books specifically. The Bible, number one, thinking about it critically becomes a whole different text altogether. That is something that does have profound effect on people's lives, and applying a critical thinking technique is only going to help. It's only going to bring about a better conclusion in any aspect. History is another topic. I'm just doing a brief overview. I will break some of these down in later videos. So just showing you what we're talking about in this series. History is a big one of the main ones we need to rethink critically. It does have a profound effect. We do need to come to better conclusions regarding history specifically. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, everybody's talking about mud flood, everybody's talking about alternate history, a whole bunch of different things, flat earth versus ball earth, a lot of different things. Thinking critically will solve all of those problems. His story versus my story. When you apply critical thinking, history is no longer a mystery. And this is a spoiler alert. I'm going to make a lot of those other channels have to come up with new material because I'm going to put a lot of these mysteries to rest just using critical thinking. Like the one about all black people being slaves from Africa. We could put that one to rest real quick. We need to put that to rest. It might have been some slaves, might have been some Africans, but we could dispel that one. Keep it simple. This is an experiment you could do for yourself. Okay. Ask any white woman who only dates black men. Ask her, do an experiment. Ask her for real. Pick an African or a room full of Africans. Tell her, let's go over here and hang out with these Africans. She'll tell you real quick, no, I'm not going over there hanging with them Africans. She know the difference between. Okay, do this experiment. Ask any white. You can ask anybody. Ask any white man. Let's go over here and hang out with these Africans. Versus these black men. Let's ask some Africans. So everybody know that black people and Africans are different, but we carry along this mystery anyway, this facade. So we could dispel that just that easy. So when it comes to history, especially when critical thinking is applied, we can come to better solutions. We can come to better conclusions. The mystery about the mud flood and hidden tech really ain't been all that hidden. It's been in our face the whole time. This is a picture of my city in the 1800s. When I was a kid, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, more than 1,000 words. There's truth to that. We all know that. But you also got to have a mind to see. When I was a kid, these tracks were still in the streets. These cobblestones, some of the streets still had these cobblestones. The trolley, street cars would still ride up and down the street. Cars had to go around them. That was in the 70s and 80s. So this technology was still around until then. So believe it or not, we're ourselves are living relics. We're living testimony to this. So won't in many cases don't have to dig through a lot of books to figure this out either. You know, we can see in these pictures, in any of the older pictures, that what they telling us is not coinciding with what we see. So that prompts a mind to think for itself. That's the only solution, for lack of a better word. If not, you're brainwashed. You're being mind controlled. That's the bottom line. So go by what you see, what you know, what you can calculate to be true. That those are the answers. So I ain't gonna break this down a whole lot until a later video. But again, the details are all right there. All of these people are posing. They know the cameraman is there. There's no question. We see black people, white people right alongside each other. It's a black dude up on that horse. That's what it looked like to me. It's a black man right there. The white man right there looking like a cowboy. We do expect to see that around this time. But it don't necessarily go along with what they're telling us. And so, like I said, a lot of these buildings and stuff have been around, and we most of us have seen them and interacted with them, been in them. So we do know that these are otherworldly buildings. They weren't built by us. I can't say that we deserve credit for these structures right now today. Look at that. But that we could see that everybody know that when looking at it with their eyes. Now what they tell us is something different. Hence the need to start thinking, what is it that I actually do see? I mean, look at this. This is also in my city. Of course, they tore this building down, but again, a lot of buildings just like this still stand to this day. Look how small these people are towards these buildings. A lot of these myths, again, I'm going to put to rest. I'm going to break them down in later videos and prove it for y'all non believers, if it's the will of the Most High. But again, the details is right there in front of us. The proof is right there in our face. Just look how straight the lines is on this building. Of course, because it's a building, right? But look at these telephone poles and these power lines. They couldn't get that straight, but they can get that straight. No, that doesn't make sense, guys. Come on. So we don't got to go back and forth and bounce off our head off the wall because of this. This is simple. So these people did not build that. We can get that clear. Move on. What's the solution? Okay, then that's where we at. And looking at this one a little closer, the only thing that seems to make sense in the picture is the building itself. Everything else seems to be out of context. All of these people. It's got to be a bright, sunny day for this camera to take this picture from this distance. It's got to be plenty of sunshine. No other way possible. See those shadows? They all got shadows about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, maybe. Between 2 and 4 o'clock, right there is what it looked like. So plenty of sunshine. They all got on black, fully clothed, head to toe. Okay, to be fair, either black, blue, or brown. So we could even throw in green just to be fair. But look at all of them. They all dress just alike. The shadows, maybe they do line up, maybe they don't. I'm no expert. I won't pretend to be. But it all just kind of seems to be out of context. The only thing seems to be telling the truth is the building itself. And that's how a lot of these old photos are. They may be photoshopped, they may be not. You never know. Can't rule it out. So it's better to look at it with a fresh perspective every time. The only thing I'm willing to believe in this picture is the building. Everything else seems to be designed to get you to think or look at something a certain way. What are these people doing waiting on the bus stop? This may be a bus stop, a horse and buggy stop, but they got two of them, three of them. What are these people doing? Standing in formation? No, they posing. So we can question that, but we don't have to. So look at it for what it is. Don't read too much into it. Just keep it simple. And something else I want to point out regarding critical thinking is something that I call the law of reversal. We'll come back to the reason I call it that. A lot of people got their own take on it. I'm not going to go in depth. Some people might know something about it, some people might not. I'm going to just touch on a few things that I think are notable, and we'll definitely keep it moving from there. It's real simple. That's like when some of these topics pop up and the conclusion just ain't adding up or something just ain't sitting right, it don't make sense to you. Apply the opposite and see if that fits and makes more sense. Sometimes it does, sometimes it don't. And we do it all the time. We just don't realize it. Like there could be a boyfriend and girlfriend, the girl could think the guy is cheating. She might look in his phone, and don't actually find no evidence or proof. And then she'll say, well, maybe he does love me. He just stupid. She applied the opposite and it seems to be true. So again, we do it all the time, we just don't realize it. So this could help again with critical thinking as a minimum, if nothing less, a thought experiment. And so that's like this one here, Godzilla. To me, it looks like it almost says God is all. The name Godzilla. But then if you read it backwards, it says all is dog. So maybe there's something there, maybe not. Just peculiar. But then when you think he's always fighting King Kong or another giant. But I picked this one to illustrate the law of reversal for a different reason. For instance, Godzilla, huge titan monster, tearing up the city, killing people, knocking down buildings, looked at as a bad guy. But as it turns out, the opposite is true. He's actually the good guy, protecting the city from the other monsters. So the movie itself illustrates the laws of reversal in many ways. And he has various villains that he fights and battles it out with, and it's an ongoing saga, keep you locked in. But this one in particular I chose because, again, we could apply the law of reversal to maybe get a different perspective on what's being portrayed. So, Godzilla fighting King Kong. Well, for me, King Kong not noticeably saying anything backwards obviously tells the tale. His name's written right out. So that's also how the law of reversal goes. You can't just write everything backwards because then people will catch on to that. So only some of it can be backwards and the rest of it has got to be truth. So we got Godzilla battling it out with King Kong, who's supposedly the bad guy. Or is he? I'll definitely be breaking this down in a later video, so keep that in mind. We'll come back to that. Just something to think about. The law of reversal is a good tool to use when applying critical thinking, if nothing less, just to help with process of elimination. This topic truly deserves its own segment. I'm gonna just give a brief overview again, assuming you know at least a little bit about it. It's not something that's a rule of thumb or, a one size fits all type of method. Just something that we could use to keep brainstorming, keep ideas moving, and help us come to a better conclusion. It's a good tool to use to help one reach better conclusions. So, applying these methods will derive a better conclusions, which will bring about a better outcome altogether. And this could all be considered to be practice for what's going to be on the test. Because any of these topics that one might feel do directly or do not directly affect their lives, there are those topics and systems and scenarios, methods that do affect directly your life. When we think of topics like movies or music or history, again, we don't think it serious enough to apply critical thinking. But when you think about situations like the economy or the school system or the news, politics, these topics are part of larger systems that do have a direct effect on our everyday life, believe it or not. All of these systems are systems upon other systems, which is part of the system itself. It could be considered the matrix or maybe not. That's a huge topic in itself. The matrix, in short, is a system of systems put together to bring about a particular outcome. Now, of course, a system is particular methods utilized again to bring about a particular outcome. So that's why I want to point this particular topic out, because it works to serve as a good example of systems, methods, or thought processes, patterns that are put together that affect our everyday life that we don't even think about, we don't even realize. So that's what it actually means to be a good critical thinker. You can't pick and choose the information that you evaluate. And critical thinking actually is integrated into our social structure. But when utilizing it properly, it takes on a whole new meaning. Well, when you think in terms of maybe like a doctor or a lawyer, police officer, These people, critical thinking is actually a part of their job. If not, it should be. They have to make critical decisions. They have to evaluate information critically. Critical thinking in the case of, let's say, a police officer. Now, this is a simple scenario maybe a lot of people can relate to. A police officer could get a call to a house. When he arrives, a domestic violence call. He could see signs on both parties of injury, maybe not. His critical thinking skills is going to directly determine which person, if not both, goes to jail. Now, this method can be misapplied or it can be applied properly and have altogether different outcome. So the skill is an attribute and it must be utilized, especially in today's times where everything's just so modern, so matter of factly, so technical. We never even bother to double check the facts. So it's best not to choose which information is suited to your taste. Be critical of a person with good critical thinking skills will be able to see through all the nonsense, which is why I felt it important to bring up the topic of the system when dealing with critical thinking because of how much these system of systems affect our everyday lives. See, we got to think about some of the intended outcomes of some of these systems that we are intertwined with. Does the outcome align with your goals, your life, your beliefs? Does it even matter? I really want to know your answers about these. Put it in the comments. It's like, for example, let's just say bill collectors. Something everybody can relate to. This is a system of a system of the system of the big system. Okay, understandably so, everybody want their money. Now, this is a complete industry based on this, and they have intended outcomes, whether we know it or not, whether it helps us or not, whether it aligns with our goals or not. So some of these we may need to be aware of. That's like if one of the most famous serial killers in the world came out with a clothing line, would you go out and buy their clothes? Knowingly or unknowingly? Well, what if everybody else was doing it? What if you just didn't know or you just following along? Is it possible that you could be involved in something like that already? So that's something that with new conclusions, you can make better decisions to have better outcomes. So, like bill collectors or customer service workers, you might be trying to call them to pay a bill. First thing they're going to want you to do on the phone is verify who you are. They ask you a whole range of questions from your birth date to your social security number. And then if you get too frustrated with that, they do stuff like hang up on you, make you call back and go through the whole process all over again, or patch you over to somebody else. So then you're sitting there yelling your information into the phone again. Now, this is all being done for some particular specific purpose. What it is, I don't know. Do you know? Maybe you do. Again, put your answers in the comments. Sometimes the verification process be so extensive, you got to look at the phone your own self to make sure you talking to the right people. And the whole time you talking to somebody who hasn't verified themselves to you. Now, of course, that could be nothing. That could just be a stretch, or could there be an actual reason that they're having you verify yourself? Or could there be a reason that they're having you go through this whole verification process just to pay your own bill? So you can't just be comfortable with what you think you know, because that makes you an agent of the system. And that means that whatever goals the system has, those are also your goals. That means whatever the intended outcome of the system is, that's what your intended outcome is. So if you go along with that without critical thinking, you become part of that. That simple. So, in conclusion, critical thinking is essential to our survival to some degree or another. Using it properly will only bring about better conclusions. This is a lifelong endeavor, so using it will only bring about a better you. Pick a topic, look at it again, train yourself, train yourself, test yourself, practice. We will figure this out. We will figure this out together. Let me know what you think.